Hello, and welcome to my critical look back at The Evil Within 2. With Ghostwire Tokyo being here, I wanted to get some perspective on where it came from as a series. I mean, a game has not trailered this well in a long time. I started with the first game and bounced off pretty quickly, but I thought I'd come back and play the second, as my understanding was it was much better. So join me today to look at how The Evil Within 2 sets up an interesting emotional story in a completely unexpected manner. The Evil Within 2 takes place a number of years after the first game, the now labelled Beacon Hospital incident, named as such so that we know everything there went well. Watching a short explainer, we learn the story behind the horror. Everyone's been put into this shared consciousness machine called STEM, by a corporation, Mobius. The machine works by connecting everyone to a core brain, which creates a shared world to coexist in. Of course, with it now being labelled an incident, everything went wrong. The game was a bit of a cult success, although has some issues with its relationship with mentally unwell people, often placing its horror here instead of seeing a group of people that are suffering enough as it is. That being said, the game had somewhat of a following and several interesting concepts throughout, including the idea of a shared consciousness, as well as limiting ammunition by a severe degree, making every bullet count. So we take control of Sebastian Castellanos, a character that would be very easy to point at and yell, "Trope!" He is an ex-detective, hard up on his luck, heavily drinking and trying to get more information about Mobius, who he is being heavily gaslit by. His daughter died in a house fire, and wife left him after she believed she got leads on a conspiracy about her daughter actually surviving the fire. There are a lot of hard-boiled themes being played with here in a really fun, tropey way, and they do lead somewhere, they are used. Seb is contacted by Kidman, his ex-rookie, who in the original game we find was working for Mobius. Hurt by this betrayal, Seb is wary of her when she reaches out, but she has the upper hand. She says his activation phrase, "We know where your daughter Lily is, and she needs your help." She is stuck in STEM Mark 2, in fact being used as its central core, and they've lost contact with their agents within, meaning you need to go in there, under supervision of your corporate overlords, solve the mystery, save your daughter, etc. This sets up our adventure, the characters within and the stakes involved. Also, her constantly being referred to as the core, as a human child, really dehumanises what's actually going on here. As we dive back into STEM, we quickly realise the situation is deteriorating. People are turning into monsters, as in the first game. A powerful killer is on the loose, and framing his murder of various Mobius operatives as pieces of grotesque and corrupt art. Oh, and he has Lily too. The first game was mostly a linear affair, but one of the more interesting aspects of 2 is how it opens up. There are a couple of neighbourhoods of the town of Union that you can explore on your own. Well, the word's probably not leisure, but you get what I mean. There are also linear sections in between which are much more traditional directed sort of horror. They are often these really intense, claustrophobic affairs, leaving you no choice but to face the Chainsaw Lady and other monsters. But after these moments of building tension, there is this release valve, the open world. Not that there isn't anything scary here, there is definitely scary moments, but they're much more player directed, you choose when to engage with them. Your radio device will connect to these signals on the map, these points of interest that will usually contain a bit of horror, some story, or a useful item, or a combination of these, meaning they are well worth you seeking out. This tension is mirrored in the stealth system also. Stealth means saving ammunition. It is survival horror, but it is also often leaving yourself vulnerable as the enemies frequently come in groups. But it's the stalking of your enemy, creeping up behind, aware that they could turn or his gribbly friend could spot you, that has the same tension as horror. There is this build up as you move forward and the release when you shove your knife into their neck. Or, in a couple of occasions, the monsters are invulnerable, so getting spotted means wasting ammunition trying to stun it and run away. When it does come time to shoot, the game also manages to build an interesting set of weapons for you to fight with. I think back to Resident Evil 4, most of that game is putting together an arsenal that can take care of most situations, switching weapons as different collections of enemies or bosses demand. It's the same in Evil Within 2, the staple handgun when upgraded becomes great at taking out singular enemies or small groups, shotguns for quick eliminations of bigger targets, sniper rifles for even tougher enemies. And then there is the most interesting weapon, the crossbow. This is the standard bolt for silent takedowns, but then a whole host of elemental bolts for laying electrical traps, freezing enemies or just blowing them up. Ammunition as the game goes on does become a little more readily available, but early on using the explosive arrows genuinely has some sort of impact. Another difference between this and Resident Evil 4 is ammunition count. There is much less of it. It's not anywhere near as punishing as the first game that really stripped back what ammunition you had, but I often felt I was near the bottom of my resource collection, trying to use it wisely. Interestingly, exploring the totality of the world did not give the sense that I was getting massively ahead on resources, as sometimes can happen in this type of game. I often made gains, but they were small and incremental. It did lead to a pretty well stocked selection by the end of the game, but it elicited this level of care, never really wanting to waste. This whole system is well balanced, and I'm sure a source of a great attention at harder difficulties as well. The types of encounters vary throughout the game. The open world sections are great for stealth, as they are much more player directed. You can choose when to engage those mobs of enemies that you can see in the distance. There are also these higher intensity combat encounters, a replay of the log cabin from Resident Evil 4, bosses and other situations where you must fight. It never quite gets as frantic as Resident Evil 4, instead choosing to be more muted, but it does bring something to these hectic moments. But it's the emotional core of the game that really got me completely on board. It's not subtle, they're rarely a character that's not a trope of some sort, not overblown into a huge conceptual idea, laughing maniacally at you. But in this overwrought style, the game manages to engage in a pile of tropes that is Sebastian. The game shows him hurting deeply over his daughter, wrecked with guilt, traumatised with the beacon incident and distrusting of everyone around him. You may think that seeing a man pushed to the absolute ends of his limits may be hard to watch, him being gaslit, manipulated and crushed under the weight of Mobius, basically being brought in to rescue what they see as essentially a motherboard in their system gone wrong. And this thing being his daughter. Theodore is there to needle further away, preying on this deep guilt. All of this could be seen as sadistic. It's not. Horror is a genre that can sometimes step into this, but it's also a genre perfect for exploring many aspects of life. The Evil Within sets up all of these emotional challenges, but then allows Seb to confront them, with the help of others, some self-reflection, as well as facing the literal ghost of Beacon Hospital. There is also a genuinely touching scene with his wife Myra, who's exploring to find their daughter has led her to be found in the system also. They get to talk about missing each other, about the impact of their daughter not being there, and his own failings. The game sets up these deep ideas so that Seb can confront them. It's interesting, when you get in the position where creators like their characters, they can make a story that becomes explorations of different parts of being human. I fully believe that they like this character, no matter how generic he may seem, as they do give him a chance. It's both about perseverance, as well as having to self-actualise enough to not be manipulated and to get what he wants. It gives a decent argument of why they should have followed up the first game. Games can, do and should provoke emotions, not all of the time of course, but they are forms of expression that people engage with in their own manner. It's not every day that we get a character that could be seen as deeply toxic and by the end becomes sympathetic. We start rooting for him. It's also a story that doesn't have to explicitly be told in game form, but the break in between the rise and fall of tension provides an interesting place to delve deeper into Seb, the various operators of Mobius, as well as the organisation itself. And Mobius is a really fun place for this to happen. You never fully get to see the whole of them, meaning they still wield this element of mystery, their power extending more than you might know. But you do get to explore the inner workings a bit. Even though they present themselves as a power for good, they are clearly a force for corruption in the world. I think it's no coincidence that every time they create a world, it gets deeply corrupted. This game wouldn't work nearly as well without the framing device either. The nature of the shared consciousness and union both work as an analogy for society, but also a place to where we can see the psychological impact of trying to construct such a thing. What happens when the smooth-talking cult priest Theodore with the ascetics of the Catholic Church comes in? Nothing good. I do think there is a small misstep here with the photographer. He's just a plain old psychopath and it does little really as an exploration of anything, apart from creating an antagonist that you do want to take down. But the game brings together some of the best pacing of a horror game, especially one that lasts out 17-ish hours that I've ever seen. The fact that some of the elements of fear being player directed with a pressure release valve means that the game can bring varying tension and fun with a great balance. And it never quite falls into that open world routine. The emotional resonance, the willingness to see your character's flaws, sit with them and find a solution is satisfying. Not every horror game needs a bad ending. That brings me to the end of today's video. Like, comment, subscribe if you've enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts on this game. My name has been Billy, goodbye.